Good evening, and welcome to the latest episode of Duos right here on the CACC Network. I'm CACC Associate Commissioner DeBiase, and in tonight's episode, we sit down with Dan and Bethann Burke and talk about a household that features not one, but two college basketball head coaches. Dan is the men's coach at Wilmington University, while Bethann is the women's coach at Crosstown School, Goldie Beacom College. They first met as student athletes at Chestnut Hill College, and since that time, as husband and wife, they have been there to support each other in their respective coaching careers. More importantly, Dan and Bethann are the proud parents of their young daughter, Juliana. Tonight's show will illustrate the type of planning and teamwork it takes to pull off the lengthy list of duties that the couple has at home and on their respective campuses. And welcome to the latest episode of Duos, joined by Dan and Bethann Burke. Thank you very much, coaches, for joining us here on the CACC Network. And I'll ask you first, and Dan, you can go. Just talk about the first time you two met at Chestnut Hill College as students. Just talk about the first interaction. Was it in the gym, at the basketball court? Was it on campus? Was it in a class? Just take us through the first meeting with Bethann.
Sure. So first of all, thanks for having us on. So Bethann was at Chestnut Hill before I was. And I guess my freshman year, she was on the women's team. I was on the men's team. So we knew of each other, passed each other in the hall. But there was no really kind of friendship or relationship. I think I would always smile at her a little bit and, try to get her attention, but she wasn't having it. But I think our first interaction was like in an open gym type setting where the women were playing before the men. But then, we started to become friendly that following summer. So we went kind of through a whole school year without really knowing each other too well, and then just got to know each other after that.
He would say hi to me in the hall, and I'd be like, why is he saying hi to me? Like, who cares? Like, who is this person? But then I finally got to know him. We had a mutual friend that kind of set us up in a sense, and she knew him really well and knew me really well. And then we just kind of clicked from there. And, we've been best friends ever since, I guess you can say that. So
the life of a student athlete is very taxing. You've got games, practice, school. You try to fit in social time. So you as you begin dating, you guys are student athletes, so you can understand what the other's going through, especially if there's a tough time. Just talk about how you guys tried to support each other while you were in college and playing basketball, and, whether it was maybe helping one study for a test or, just getting some extra shots up in the gym. Just talk about how you guys fed off one another.
So that's a good question I've never really thought about before, but just in thinking about it now, I think that you're right. We understood what each other were going through. So, if one of us was having issues in a class, or obviously we both loved our experience, but no student athlete's experience on a team is perfect. So we could both vent to each other and use each other as sounding boards, so to speak, to try to get through whatever hard time we were going through. But also just being there for each other when it comes to, winning or losing a game, or, she was student teaching at one point. So I'll be there for her to help her out with things because that schedule is hard. She was waking up early, practicing late. So I would just be there for her to help her out with whatever she needed. So I think in a lot of different ways, your question's a great one because we help each other out through the whole process.
Yeah, I would agree. I think just thinking about that now, that kind of maybe led into what we're doing professionally, because you're doing the same thing at the exact same time, but maybe you're not feeling the same way. You might find one person, as Dan was saying, maybe is going through a difficult time, and maybe everything's going great for the other person. You got to be there for that person. You got to listen to them. And it's not always about telling them what to do, but just being a person that they can trust and that they can go to. And then thinking about that now, it's probably the same thing for us professionally. So I would probably say we were doing that at a very early stage, as student athletes.
And I was actually going to ask a little bit about that later on in the interview about, you're in the same profession now as head coaches, and, I have some friends who are coaches, and whether it's their husband or their wife, that they don't work in sports, sometimes they don't get, coming home after a tough loss, or maybe not getting the recruit that you've been pushing hard for. Just talk a little bit about that, how, Dan, if let's say you have a tough loss and you come home, and Bethann, you've been a part of that, or you've been through some tough losses, how do you just kind of be that sounding board, or how do you just help support, or vice versa, just to kind of pick each other up?
So I think that we have different philosophies when it comes to certain things, and we also have very different personalities. I think I'm much more reserved, where if I'm dealing with something, I don't really think I share it as freely or as naturally as she does. So, I think for me, it's anytime you're in a relationship, it's just being there for whatever your partner needs. So, if my partner needs somebody to listen, or to provide feedback for something, then that's what the job is. And sometimes for me, if I'm struggling with something, a lot of times, like I said, I don't verbalize it. So sometimes it's her job to pull it out of me to make me feel better, even if it's not natural. So I think it's interesting, because we are in the same profession, but we also have the responsibilities that any partner has in a relationship. So it's our reality. So it's not really something that's different for us, even though it might be different for everybody else.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, it's never as bad as you think and as good as you think too. So, if you have a really bad practice, or like you said, you miss out on something like a recruit or something like that, things go so quickly. You have to rebound, and maybe in 10 hours you get a call from somebody else, or the next day's practice is great. So just being there to listen, and if you have a really tough loss and the other one won, you don't come in and you don't start bragging about your win. That's just standard. You listen, and then when that person's done, you talk about the win, and it switches, and then you kind of regroup from there. So it's almost like for us, it can almost be closure. Like you're talking to that person that gets your team, gets what you're doing, and then it almost allows you to move on. Where, I think at least for me, we can move on quickly that way, where just having that person to speak to about it, and to give you some input and advice, and just be that sounding board.
As you guys are, and I'll backtrack a little bit back to when you were student athletes, as you start to begin to think about, what you want to do after college, I mentioned that Bethann, you were doing student teaching and everything, but as you start to get these ideas maybe of, hey, I want to coach basketball, whether at the high school level, college level, whatever it is, and you're starting to work your way up. You become an assistant coach, and you got to put in a lot of long hours and grind through some of the assistant coaches, the coaching duties to eventually become a head coach. Just talk about how impressed each of you was with the other, in that, you paid your dues, you put in the long hours to become a head coach. Because I don't think people really understand that it's not a 1 or 2 day process. It's, and sometimes it's not even a 1 or 2 year process. It could be a 1 or 2 decade process to become.
Absolutely.
Just talk about this, the respect that both of you have for each other, in that, what you did to become a head coach.
I think respect is a great word. Support is a great word. Understanding, because like you said, we both had really windy roads to get where we are professionally to be head coaches. My road started at Chestnut Hill, and then to Camden County, and then to Wilmington. So I think being in a relationship with Bethann, it made me realize what is really important to me professionally. When I first started coaching as a 23-year-old, I think everyone has these visions of grandeur where, I'm going to be this by this time, and this by this time, and on TV and all that kind of stuff. But I think as our relationship progressed, it really put into perspective what was important to me, being there for her, and, being a good partner was more important to me than, being able to move all over the country and take whatever job is there. So is there a certain element of professional sacrifice that's required, I guess, by some people? And some people might say so, but to me, being able to be a head coach, we're very lucky to be doing what we're doing, where we are. So, I think that being there for each other is most important to us. If that answers your question, I might have gotten off track there, but.
Oh, no, it's.
I think.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. In whatever field you work in sports, there's some sort of a personal sacrifice that's made by the individual, and I'm sure when you're in your marriage, yeah, I mean there's both of those professional aspirations and how do you make it work to accomplish all the goals you want athletically, but also to have a successful marriage and everything. Sorry, Bethann, I didn't mean to cut you off.
To go to what you're saying about the journey, I think for me, especially, like, I was consumed in what I was doing. So I really wasn't caught up in, you might have a lot of people out there that they want to get to the final destination, where I was just doing what I was doing because I was enjoying it. As Dan had said, I started out as a high school teacher for 7 years, and I didn't leave that profession until I came to Goldie. But while I was teaching, I was able to get high school experience. I was also at Penn, and then I was at Holy Family. So I really didn't have to make many sacrifices with location or maybe professionally. I think you sacrifice socially. My experience as a 23, 24, or 20-year-old is very different than a lot of my peers where they were doing different things that they enjoyed, but that's not necessarily what I was about. My enjoyment was going and teaching, and then maybe I wasn't getting home till 10, but I left at 5 a.m. And that was kind of my 20s, and I don't regret any of that, but that's a different path than maybe many other people are willing to take. But I think, as Dan said, we're very lucky to be in a location where our connections are in the Philadelphia area, and that's where all of our experience has pretty much come from.
What is the basketball talk like in your household in terms of not as a fan, but as from a coaching perspective? Are there a lot of X's and O's discussed, or is it more of, I'm having this situation with the player, any advice you can offer? What's kind of the back and forth in that regard?
Way more the latter. In my opinion, it's way more of, obviously, we respect, first and foremost, the privacy of our players and of our coworkers and everything. That's first and foremost. But we do talk about certain issues that may be arising within our teams, not necessarily X and O wise or how it might look on the court, but dealing with personalities, dealing with players who might be struggling with confidence, any issues with families that may be arising, like families of players that not necessarily specific names of families, but hey, this family is, I'm having a family do this to me. So, how would you deal with it? So I think those conversations are way more prevalent than the X's and O's.
Yeah, I would agree. It really comes down to leading people, and to be able to get to the court and talk about systems or defense or strategy, you have to be able to lead your kids in the best way that you feel is possible. So we have a lot a discussion about that. I feel like we know each other's teams very well, you know, in a positive way. Like Dan said, we're not speaking negatively of them, but you know, I'll go around, maybe I go to his practice and go around his guys, and I just feel like I know them because I know the work that went into getting them and what high school, maybe I went to their high school game, and there's just so much more that maybe they know that we know about each other's teams. But, you know, and even when things are going well, hey, we did this today. This was a great idea. You might want to steal it. And even if he doesn't use it, maybe there's a friend of ours that's in the profession that like he can give it to, or I heard something and I can get vice versa. So there's a lot of those discussions. And I think X's and O's, we might disagree or a little bit or have different philosophies because we really have different teams in the sense. There's some years where we have very similar players and the way that they play. And then there's other years where our teams are very different in the way that they play. And I think that you can learn a lot from the other person because they're not doing the exact same thing. So there's a lot of healthy discussion in that regard too.
And if I could just add also, I think, I don't know if other coaches would agree, but I think that coaches struggle with confidence just as much as players do. Because as head coaches, it's our job to lay out the blueprint for how our team is going to be on the floor and off the floor. So, you know, you can look at our records and see that, you know, sometimes it doesn't always go as well in certain stretches as possible. And there's that real kind of self-doubt that could creep into a coach's mind. And that's where it's good for both of us to share what we're going through. And maybe our partner can either say, yeah, why would you do that? Or, you know, reaffirm us and say, hey, stay on track and kind of keep our confidence up.
You know, whether it's Dan is coaching a game or Bethann's coaching a game, when the other is watching, you know, when one of you is watching the other coach in a game and you're just, whether you're watching it online or you're there in the stands watching, do you get the nervousness for the other, you know, are you just pulling so hard for them to win? Or, you know, like, I guess, do you outwardly show it kind of as a fan, or are you able to kind of get into that coaching mindset and have that stoic appearance that, you know, no matter what's going on in the game, you're either excited or you're feeling for the other, whether if one's up or one's down? Just how do you handle watching each other coach?
Speaking for myself, I definitely am on that roller coaster, whether even just following, like say we're on the road and they might be playing a 1 o'clock Saturday game. If we're playing a 3 o'clock game and I'm following on the live stats, you know, I do feel that emotional roller coaster depending on if they're doing well or if they're not doing well. When it comes to actually being in the stands, obviously our daughter is very young, so we haven't been parents of a child that plays, but I feel like I can understand what a parent's going through because I want for her to do so well, but at the same time, I don't want to be that person that's like, you know, being demonstrative or anything like that. So it's managing what you feel, but also, like you said, having that stoic, you know, unemotional appearance. That's I don't know about her, but that's what I go through.
Yeah, I would say I'm really quiet, you know, and the fact that very rarely do we get to each other's games. If we're fortunate enough to play home on a Saturday doubleheader, by the time that we finish our game and I do what I need to do at school, I might catch the last 10 minutes of their game if I'm lucky. So that's sometimes like a really good day. If we won and they won, that's a great day. If I'm just watching one of their games, I'm just really quiet and I'm just kind of, I might know going into that game what that game means and the strategy behind it, and also the dynamic of the team, like how they're doing, and just kind of overseeing that and looking at it and evaluating it from a coach's eye. Definitely, I might clap, I might not. Doesn't mean anything either way. Just really into the game. And then I think after the game, you want to know what the other person thinks. If you were to look at both of us coming up to each other at either game, it's like, what did you think? And in that moment, you really want the honest truth, whether it's criticism or honesty. And that's where you really want that feedback from a peer coach, not necessarily spouse, but I think because that is your spouse, you trust them more than anybody to give you that feedback. So if they are, hey, why did you what was up with that? You don't take it personal because you know it's coming from a good place. So,
Dan, you had mentioned your daughter, Juliana. I am always amazed at female coaches who are pregnant and still working and coaching in a profession that it's not 9 to 5, or it's not, I'm going to take a year off. There's still the odd hours, the travel for games, recruiting, everything. And there's so much stress that goes involved. It just in regular coaching. Just talk about how much respect you have for Bethann going through that, carrying your child, but still making sure all the demands of her job in the coaching profession were met.
Respect isn't the word. I mean, I just have immense admiration for everything she does, and I couldn't imagine carrying a child and going through all that. And I'll tell you something. Her biggest focus after having our child, which was in May, was I need to get back recruiting. How am I going to get back to July recruiting as quickly as possible? So that's her mindset. It's just I don't think I could do it. She's a rock star, and that's just it's unbelievable to me. Just being able to be focused and continue to be motivated and just deal with everything we have to deal with while going through that. But then it's also that time when that baby is dependent on her for a lot of things after birth. So I don't know about you, but that year after giving birth might have been harder than leading up to it.
Absolutely. So. Well, first of all, I have a good person that helps me. It's not just me. We do things together. But I think, and not that you didn't mean it this way, but females are so much tougher than so many people think. And I grew up with 4 brothers, and not that I'm the toughest person in the world, but whatever you have, you're going to deal with it. That's what you got to deal with. So your daily routine, or, I don't sit at practice. Even when I was pregnant, we have 2.5 hour practice. I'm not sitting down. That's just not my mentality. So you don't even think twice. You just think, this is what I'm doing. And you're so hyper-focused on your day-to-day tasks that you don't really consume yourself in, this is so much, I have to deal with this. And then I think then you have a child, now you're responsible for this person. And, that was difficult because we had to figure out when, we were going to practice in the morning, if they're practicing at night. We can't practice at the same time. It's just not going to work. Or if we did, all right, who's going to watch our child? And that starts to lead into other questions. And it ultimately comes down to, how well do you work with your partner? How well do you communicate with them? And things are always difficult, but you get through it. And, that's where we just have to be tough people. So.
Oh yeah, and I mean it as all respect.
I know you do.
I have a good friend who's a high school basketball coach, and she went through it 5 years ago, I want to say. She was pregnant while coaching, and I said, I don't know how you did it, because I would have been curled up somewhere crying in the corner. I wouldn't do it. But you've got a young daughter. You've got a profession that, again, go back to odd hours, long hours. There's no 9 to 5 in this profession. Just talk about the teamwork and the communication involved to make sure that, Dan, if you're on the road recruiting, maybe Bethann, you're staying back with the baby, or vice versa, or, or even, and this is an opportunity to give a shout out to maybe relatives or grandparents that help out as well. Just talk about the teamwork involved it takes to make sure that, your daughter's needs are met and also your school's needs are met.
Sure. So we are very lucky that we have both of our families pretty close to help out. And so Bethann's mother is about a half hour away. So if we had, a need for a babysitter during the week, she would come over. And then my mother is about an hour 15 away. So on the weekend, she would come over if we both had games on the same day or anything like that. But in terms of the scheduling and everything, I think that we feed off of each other really well, and that some of my weaknesses are her strengths. and vice versa, maybe. I think that she does the planning, she does the organization, because that's not something I'm good at all. I get so caught up in what I'm doing that I don't really think ahead. Whereas,
so you're saying she's the general and you're the soldier. You get.
Hey, tell me what to do, I'll do it. That's me. I'm willing to do anything, but I won't think about it ahead of time. So she's really the straw that stirs the drink, and I just do what I'm told.
It's not that bad. Yeah, I think you have to figure things out in a sense of, like you talked about recruiting. That happens frequently. When our daughter was an infant, maybe they had a game and I was going to go recruiting, and it's like, well, you have to bring the child with you. And that's a whole other event in itself. And sometimes it's not feasible. If the recruit is within an hour, okay, you can do it. But if you really want to go see a kid, you have to look at compromises. Okay, is there another day you can see them? Can you send an assistant? And sometimes the answer is no. Like, this is the one game you have to go to, and you can't get to all the other ones. And that's where we try to communicate as much as possible to our families. And we're really lucky that our family is willing to help out and be there, and especially watch our daughter on game days, because you can't find childcare for 13, 14 hours. That's just not going to happen. But really planning ahead, and it might mean that you have to change your practice time or your schedule. Maybe you were going to watch film before practice, but now you're going to do it after, because one of us has to do something that's important. So there isn't one of us that has a more important program. It's equal. And there might be that particular day, one has preference over the other because of the situation that is presented, but there's not one that's more important than the other. And that's really, we have a really good sense of that. And I think that's why we're able to do what we're doing in a successful manner in the communication, because of that equality.
And both of our teams are so good with dealing with the situation as well, because there might be some times where, if I'm supposed to pick our daughter up from her before they start practice, if we run late for some reason, or if there's traffic, her team is great with staying focused. If there's some kind of unexpected situation where Juliana has to be there, and same with our guys. I can't say enough about the players on our team and the people they are, that they don't get distracted, they understand, and they're welcoming of the situation.
In a country where 1 in 5 people are affected by a mental health condition, it's time for all of us to step up and change the conversation.
We all have stress in our lives and manage it in different ways.
Grades,
finances,
practice,
family,
games,
finals,
homework,
playing time,
friends,
midterms,
treatment, studying,
sleep, time for me.
We don't have to find the balance on our own.
It's okay not to be okay.
We're all in this together.
People can and do get better.
Caring about one another can be your competitive advantage.
Communicate.
Be aware.
Show compassion.
Be a champion for each other.
Hope starts with you.
Hope starts with me.
Hope starts with us. We are CACC student athletes, and we are breaking the stigma.
Now, is she a fan of one school more than the other, or has it been equally split?
Yeah, I don't think she cares.
Yeah, she knows. She knows Goldie Peak. I'm in Wilmington. She knows they're in Delaware, and I think if she's at the gym, she just wants to run on the court. So during a game, that's a disaster. That's difficult to try to hold her back. But in practice, she just wants to be running around with the kids, and if there's live play, she just thinks she can run out in the midst of the live play. So
as long as our mascot better, so I think she likes it.
So as long as she sees either mom or dad in the gym, everything's fine.
Yep,
yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's so much basketball in your family in terms of it's the same profession. What do you guys do as a family just to decompress a little bit from the sport? Maybe after the season's over, just a chance to kind of get away, refresh a little bit. What else do you guys like to do other than just the basketball component?
We're pretty boring. We're not a family that has to always have something on the schedule. We do like to just relax and just go out in the yard and just be. But we talk about the planning. Bethann's great with pretty much every year. She sets up a little getaway for us. And even that, we like to go places where there's not too much going on. We're just change the scenery and just experience something different. But that's all her, because she thinks ahead and says, okay, this week we're going away, and it's a clear schedule. So that's really what it is. Pretty simple.
Yeah, I would say we're a little different than other couples where maybe, you hear about your friends that are in different professions and they go out to dinner with other couples and social. Not that we don't do that, but that time is spent on basketball stuff. And then I would say the time that we do have is spent with our families. We both have very large families. We both have a lot of siblings, and we're very close with our family members. So if we have a free Saturday, we're probably going to go to visit one of their houses. That's just the way that it is. And we do like to get away. I'm a big, American history person. That's what I taught for 7 years. So I like to see what America has to offer. And not that I don't want to travel internationally, but try to visit places you've never been, try to eat food you haven't eaten, and get a different way of life, whether it's we're going to go horseback riding or hiking or kayaking, just something that we typically don't do, which we definitely don't do those things during the year. We don't have time to get a different experience, to just get away from, that daily day-to-day schedule that you have. But yeah, and I would say just those things. But we do spend a lot of time with our family.
Now, what is your area of interest in American history? Like mine's World War II, so that's because I took some classes in history in college, so I'm always interested in hearing from different people. Definitely.
Well, for majority of my teaching career, I taught global studies, economics, and political science. So anything governmental. I think right now I like the fact of like westward expansion, anything in that way. So us traveling to an area where, it was settled in the 1850s or something like that. Like, I'm from New Jersey. I'm from South Jersey. He's from Pennsylvania. Like, we're just not accustomed to those type of places around here. And so just anything different in that regard. It's just different geographically, different culturally, the history of the town. I think all that's really interesting.
And finally, I'll ask both of you, just talk about how special the sport of basketball has been and how much it's meant to the two of you. It's not just a sport that you play, and I'm sure a sport that you watch on TV, but it's provided so many things, marriage, a daughter, just so many memories. Just talk about how important it's been in both your lives.
So, I was introduced to basketball, before I can remember. My grandfather, he played at Villanova, and he was a loyal fan from the time I was born until he passed when I was about 20, 25, 26. So to me, it's more than just like a sport. It's family. I think of him when I think of basketball. It's just always something I've done. My grandmother always wanted me to try different sports. She would send me to like all sports camps and make me try lacrosse and soccer, and I just was not interested at all. So I probably would have been better at some of those sports, but basketball was just it for me. I just love everything about it. Most of my relationships have come from basketball, not just with her, but with friends. So it might be unhealthy to identify yourself so closely with one activity or sport, but that's me with basketball. I couldn't imagine myself without.
Yeah, my experience has really just been a history end of it. My grandfather played in high school in 1937, so hearing the stories, they had the jump ball after every score. And, hearing those stories growing up was so different. I don't know if a lot of people talk to somebody that played during that time. And then my dad played in high school, was a very successful player. My aunt played, and this is the time where not all players on the court could score. You're talking about in the 60s. So just then that leading into my brothers, I'm one of 5 and my 4 brothers played. And so I almost had to beg to play. You know, it was in kindergarten and I wanted to get on the 2nd grade team and I had to beg my parents to let me do that. So it was all around me, but I also played other sports in high school, but I knew basketball was going to be the sport that I was going to play in college. I think it's, as Dan said, it's one of those things that you just, this is your life. This is what you know, holidays, there's basketball, certain, like I've never really gone skiing. I'm sure I would love it, but just like that's basketball season. I've just never gone. And these aren't things that are odd to us because that's all we know. And then those friendships, if you think about your closest friends, they're your teammates that you had the difficult practices with, and they, you had to run the sprints and you had the tough losses and the great wins, and you look back and you have those special bonds with them. And then leading into professionally, some of my closest friends are colleagues of mine, that I've coached against or that I've worked with, and we've kept those relationships. So you kind of have like a little brother or sisterhood within that coaching profession too.
Well, Dan, Bethann, we really appreciate the time. We're looking forward to the winter after the new year once we can tip off another season. So we're looking forward to it. Best of luck with practices, coming up when you get a chance to get with your teams, and best of luck in the winter. And we will talk with you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for everything you do, you and the conference and everybody. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate it. And thank you for joining us on this latest episode of CACC Network's Duos right here, caccnetwork.com. Good night, everyone.